Hello and welcome into the Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Root of Big Ten Network, and this episode's guests are Jack Hoiberg, former Michigan State basketball player, and Big Ten Network manager of research, Harold Shelton. Let's get into it.
Take a look, listen, and enjoy. Look at here.
With the catch, the finish! Oh, my goodness! What a catch!
Oh,
Energy,
my goodness.
enthusiasm. It's picked off! It's selfish! Brilliant!
He's still going! Touchdown!
All right, we'll get to Jack Hoiberg in just a moment. But first, quick message from our sponsor, Northwestern University School of Professional Studies. You can build a solid foundation in the strategic, creative, and analytic skills that are essential for success in the business of sports in the master's program in sports administration at Northwestern University. Find out more at sps.northwestern.edu/sports. Great program, as always, being offered here. Definitely check it out if you want to work in the business of sports, work in the industry, maybe at a place like Big Ten Network. Check it out, Northwestern SPS. All right, now to our first guest, Jack Hoiberg. Last name certainly sounds familiar. You're a basketball fan. His father, of course, is the coach at Nebraska men's basketball, Fred Hoiberg. Also the former coach of the Chicago Bulls and Iowa State, former NBA player with the Minnesota Timberwolves and front office executive as well. So comes from a basketball family, Jack does, and we talked plenty about him growing up around the game, around some really famous NBA players' personalities, and what it's like to grow up with your dad being such a high-profile figure in the basketball world, and then kind of carving his own path in basketball like he did, walking on at Michigan State, eventually receiving a scholarship at Michigan State, and now moving on to the what is likely the last chapter of his college basketball career, transferring to UT-A, Texas at Arlington for the next season. So good discussion with Jack, and then after that we talk with Harold Shelton, as we mentioned at the top. But first we'll get to Jack Hoiberg, and that interview starts right now. All right, I'm very pleased to be joined by Jack Hoiberg, one of the newest members of the UT-Arlington Mavericks men's basketball team. But since this is a Big Ten pod, I got to mention that Jack spent 4 years on the Michigan State Spartans squad. And, of course, his dad, Fred, is the current head coach at Nebraska. So, Jack, how's it going, man?
Good. How you doing?
Doing all right. Talking a little bit before this, it's kind of a slow time of year in Big Ten country, but I'm wondering what this time of year is like for you, going through a transfer. Are you down in Texas yet? How's that whole adjustment going? And just get into that transition in your life.
Yeah. So right now I just graduated from MSU this past weekend. So we graduate we get done with school a little bit earlier than most schools, I think. And now I'm just back home in Nebraska for the month of May. So it's nice spending some time with some family before I head down to Texas in June.
All right. Congrats on graduating, first of all.
Thank you.
What went into the decision to transfer down to UT-Arlington? Have you visited the campus yet? How did that whole thing come about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I spent 4 years at Michigan State, and made some unforgettable experiences and memories and stuff like that. But the thing that I really wanted to do was play significant minutes. Obviously being on some great teams at Michigan State, I wasn't able to get the opportunity playing under Cassius Winston, and players of that nature. But I also learned a lot, and I think that it'll help me in this transfer situation. And then why I chose UTA is right off the bat, right when I entered the portal, they were the most aggressive in recruiting me. The situation's good for opportunity to play. I think that I have a good chance to play some significant minutes there and make an impact on a team that has only been to the NCAA tournament once. That's my goal next year, is to help us and do whatever I can to make it to a NCAA tournament. Sun Belt's a solid conference for sure. So we'll have some good competition, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, listen, no shame in playing behind Cassius Winston. It's an all-time great. I'm sure it made you a lot better in practice as well.
Yeah.
So going back, all the way to the beginning, sort of with you just growing up in a basketball family, obviously you're around the game a lot growing up, I'm sure. Did you realize, like, as you were getting older, that it kind of wasn't really a typical childhood like that most of your peers might have had with your dad being in the league, then working in the league, and I'm sure you guys moving all around at certain points in your life?
Yeah, I don't think that I really realized that it was kind of a strange childhood until my dad took the head coaching job at Iowa State. Even when he was with the Timberwolves and when I was able to go in the locker room and go to all the games and meet all those cool players like Kevin Garnett, the guys that my dad played with in Minnesota, and then he was also in their front office. But I really didn't realize it until we moved to Iowa and social media became more prevalent in everything, really. So, I mean, I got a Twitter and then, I saw how much people looked up to my dad when we were in public or they'd go ask him for a picture. And then my parents would tell me that I have to kind of, be a little bit more careful than everyone else, because if I were to do something wrong or anything like that, it'd be a little bit more in the public eye than just any normal kid. So I think I realized that when we moved to Iowa and I was going through that. And, it wasn't easy, but there's definitely been a ton of amazing opportunities that have come from just having the family that I have.
Yeah, I mean, the microscope would be on you for sure. And you mentioned, being around NBA players, Kevin Garnett as an example. So were there any memories that you look back on, whether it was from your younger days of your childhood around the T-Wolves or maybe later on, around the Bulls? Like, is there any experiences or brushes with NBA greatness or celebrities or anything that you look back on, you're like, that was, pretty cool to experience at that age?
Yeah, one thing that was pretty cool that I tell a lot of people about was when the Xbox 360 came out. The day that it came out, Kevin Garnett bought 12 of them, and he actually gave one to me for Christmas. So, so that was a pretty funny thing that I think that's pretty cool looking back on it. And then like all my dad's teammates would call me Little Freddie, which I thought was pretty funny. And then after that, I don't have too many like specific memories, but just knowing people like the guys that played for my dad at Iowa State, George Niang, Naz Long, Matt Thomas, Abdul Nader, those guys that are in the NBA right now, Monte Morris. It's been cool to have relationships with those guys and know some guys that are playing in the NBA from guys that played for my dad in college. And then also, one time I talked to D Rose about what it was like to have his own shoe. And he was telling me about how they design the shoes and then send him options, and then he gets to pick what he likes and all that type of stuff. So that was pretty cool also. And then, yeah, like I said, just meeting those guys that played for the Bulls also was a super cool experience.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to like what it must have been like walking around Hinsdale Central and you're like, your dad is the coach of the Bulls. Like, did kids ever approach you and just want to talk hoops or want to talk ball, or did everyone kind of like get over it pretty quickly?
At first, everyone would come up to me and talk about the Bulls and that sort of stuff, but it dies down pretty quickly. After I get to know somebody or get to know everybody, then I just kind of feel like a regular kid. It doesn't really feel like that big of a deal. Every now and then I'd get questions about the Bulls or my dad, but other than that, everyone was pretty cool about it and just kind of let me be my own person.
Yeah, and you are your own person and player, obviously, and you did choose Michigan State for hoops. Obviously, a crazy elite program, awesome opportunity. How did it come about for you? What was the process like to know that you would potentially get a spot, or did you even know? Like, just take me through landing up in East Lansing.
Yeah, so I had kind of a unorthodox approach to playing basketball in college because my last 2 years of high school, I didn't play any AAU basketball. I actually focused more on golf. And I was actually, I had a scholarship and I was committed to play golf at the University of South Dakota. And then during my senior year, I was playing basketball and it was going pretty well. And I realized that basketball was the sport that I wanted to play in college. So it helps with my dad having connections and stuff like that. And we were able to contact some schools, and I ended up taking a visit at Michigan State. And, Coach Izzo treated me really well on the visit. And, I love the family atmosphere and everything that was going on there. Michigan State wasn't even really on my radar until we reached out, and they treated me really well and like I was family. So I decided to jump on that opportunity.
Yeah, real quick, you brought up golf. I know you said you turned down the opportunity to play D1, but are you a golf fan? Like, do you have favorite guys that are on the tour? Take me inside kind of your golf fandom.
Yeah, I love golf still. It was pretty cool. I won 2 state championships playing at Hinsdale Central. They're pretty notorious golf school. And I was able to play with some guys who are trying to go pro this year. But my favorite player on the tour, I love Tiger. I love like Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, those type of guys. I got to root for the lefties because I'm a lefty myself. So Phil Mickelson. Yeah, I mean, Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, all those guys. I mean, I don't know if I have one specific favorite player, but I'm definitely a fan of the game.
Awesome. Yeah. Going back to what you said about, MSU being a family atmosphere, environment, and, Izzo being welcoming to you guys. I know one of the big highlights that got a lot of publicity was when you started against your dad's Nebraska team back in February 2020. You got on the board in that game. I think we had 4 points and even crashed, I believe, the post-game press conference, reading back on it. So throughout that whole experience, who would you say was like the most nervous? Was it you? Was it your dad? Or was it Coach Izzo for, making a lineup change in the middle of the season like that?
Probably Coach Izzo, because if we got off to a bad start and maybe lost by a couple points, then I feel like maybe he'd look back on the decision differently. But I honestly didn't feel too nervous. Coach Izzo told me probably 40 minutes before the game, and all my teammates were really helpful. Cassius and Xavier were coming up to me, telling me that this stuff's easier than practice, stuff like that helped me kind of block out any nerves that I had. But I mean, it was definitely an amazing experience that I'll never forget. And Coach Izzo doing that was pretty cool for my family, because I had a lot of family in attendance and stuff like that.
Yeah, certainly an awesome experience, and glad it worked out. And I know, you touched on what Cassius said, how it's just easier in the game sometimes when you get out there. I know you got minutes. I mean, as recently in a really huge game against the number 2 Michigan squad that was on the brink of the Final Four this year. That was, I think, March 7th on your guys' senior day, and you had some key minutes, like I said in that one. I remember listening to that game. I was on a road trip, but I was listening like on the edge of my seat. That was a really good game late in the Big Ten season. So what was it like to play in that rivalry, contribute, and where does it kind of rank among your Spartan memories?
Yeah, that's definitely up there. I mean, there were so many times throughout my career that coaches would tell me, be ready, be ready. We're thinking about playing you this game, be ready. And, those minutes and that opportunity came in that Michigan game. And I mean, to have it be against the rival school that, everyone hates, and then ended up beating them as their number 2 in the country, that was a really cool thing that that I'll definitely take with me. And that being on senior day also was another reason why it was so special.
For sure. And then when you reflect, I've already brought up, 2 pretty notable ones, but do you have any other things that you'll take with you that you reflect on? Maybe they're not in the game, but something from your time on campus that, just memories that you'll cherish when you look back on your college basketball career.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'll take with me is the relationships and friendships that I've gotten with my time being at Michigan State. I mean, the Final Four was amazing. The Big Ten championships were great, but I think the most valuable thing was the people that I've met and the friends that I've made along the way. I think that with the people that I met, it'll open up opportunities in the future for myself and just the connections that I built throughout my time at Michigan State. I think those are really the most important and the coolest things to me.
Yeah, and your redshirt year, your freshman year would have been with the Miles Bridges, Jaren Jackson team, right?
Yep, correct.
Guys, okay. So, you started obviously with some crazy athletes, and that continued. You got X in the NBA now, plenty of guys who could fill it up and do some really impressive stuff. So, like, throughout your entire career, what's maybe the craziest thing you saw in practice or something these guys did that you're just like, man, these dudes are elite. And like when you see what Bridges and Jaren are doing now in the league and X too, a lot of these guys, you reflect on and you're like, yeah, I saw that coming back in 2017, 18.
Yeah. I mean, that team my freshman year was one of the most talented teams I've ever seen. I mean, we had those 4 NBA guys. X was barely playing that year till the end. And then I think we went 30-5 that year. But just every practice we had Miles doing those crazy dunks that you see on NBA Twitter or on TV and that type of stuff. We saw Miles doing that every day in practice. We saw young Jaren who was going through some learning curves, but obviously he's turned out great. We saw X, who wasn't really in the best of shape, but completely transformed his body. And then we saw prime Joshua Langford before the injuries, which, he was one of the biggest pieces on that team. So, I mean, that team was unbelievable. And looking back on it, it was really cool to even be a part of that team. And then I still talk to a lot of those guys, talk to Jaren almost daily. Still got a group chat with Miles in it. Still talk to X and Cash sometimes. So, I mean, it was just really cool to play with some guys that are in the league. And then also seeing them doing great there has been awesome.
Yeah, my limited interactions with those guys, or there was like, I think I was in the locker room at the Final Four one year, and I talked to Jaren at the NBA All-Star Weekend when it was in Chicago, and like Jaren is hilarious. Like he's the funniest dude, even though I've probably shared 3 sentences with the guy.
He's goofy, yeah.
Just made me crack up like in the brief interactions. But I also got some inside info on you. I don't know like if this is well known among Spartan fans, but definitely in the locker room. I heard they call you Step Back Jack. Is that right?
Step Back Jack. Yep.
Okay. I might sound ignorant right now to Michigan State fans. Is that well known, or is that more of an internal thing?
I would say it's kind of well known. Every time I post like an Instagram picture, I'll get a couple of Spartan fans saying "Step Back Jack," stuff like that. It's funny because I hit one step back against Ohio State, and then everyone started calling me Step Back Jack. Like I do it in practice and stuff, but it was pretty funny to see the sport, like part of a fan base start to call me Step Back Jack just off of one shot.
There we go. I thought I had a scoop, but I guess not. But either way, I did see also, in your commitment graphic to UTA, I guess they're I don't know if it's going to carry into next season, but their hashtag is Mav Up Baby. So, you got 2 catchy slogans right there. Step Back, Jack, Mav Up Baby. Like this could be a little collab going here.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that'd be a great way to start my career there.
Just endear yourself to the locals. All right, Jack, before we wrap up real quick, I don't expect you to be a Husker basketball expert or necessarily, answer for your dad on any of this, but I know you're in Nebraska right now, like you mentioned.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you could share maybe your perspective on what your dad's building there. And I know that school and that community is special to your family. So if you could just give us an inside peek at what he's building with the Huskers.
Yeah, I think my dad's building something really special here at Nebraska. They got a top 15 recruiting class coming in next year. They got a lot of guys returning, a lot of good guys returning. So, I'm really excited for him because I think I heard this stat that I think they have 80% of their scoring returning or something like that. And the most that he ever had returning at Iowa State was 40. So having 80% of the scoring returning and then having Nebraska's first ever 5-star recruit and some other great players coming in, I think that they're just starting something really special there. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we obviously any college basketball fan remembers how scary those Iowa State teams were. And you mentioned you rattled off a lot of those guys that are in the league now. We see them doing big things. And the blueprint is definitely there. And a couple of just quick, fun, kind of lighter questions to end the interview here. But we know Izzo can shoot free throws with the best of them. We know your dad was a good shooter in the league. I think over 40% for his career. Who would win in a game of horse, Izzo or Fred?
Whew. Not to knock on coaches, but I think my dad will get him there. My dad has that a little more experience in the playing field than Coach is, but I don't know. Coach Izzo does have some life experience on him, so maybe he'd come up with some trick shots that my dad wouldn't know how to deal with.
What about a free throw contest, straight up?
That'd be a little closer. Coaches would shoot free throws before every practice, but my dad used to be a pretty good free throw shooter himself too, so I think that one would be a little closer.
All right, last comp here. Which one would give a better pregame speech? More motivating or fired up pregame speech?
I think Izzo definitely knows how to get everyone fired up. I'm gonna have to go with Coach Iz for the getting dudes fired up.
All right, last question. Rarely do we have that many guests anywhere in Big Ten country who are so familiar with like two different Big Ten campuses. Like obviously you lived 4 years in East Lansing, spending some time in Nebraska now. I don't know how well you know the comparatively the ins and outs, but if you could, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. What's one thing that East Lansing does better than Lincoln, and then one thing Lincoln does better than East Lansing?
I think that good question.
It is tough. I put you on the spot.
I think that East Lansing has better pizza. Lincoln doesn't have any good pizza spots, in my opinion. And then I think Lincoln, I'm just going to keep in the food. I think Lincoln's got more food options, though.
A little more variety?
A little more variety, definitely.
Okay. I can see that. East Lansing's got the kind of Detroit influence going on, the pan pizza. Yeah. And not going to lie, like, you're right. People sleep on Lincoln, Nebraska cuisine.
They do.
Everyone knows about the sushi there. The sushi scene is really good with Blue Sushi, and they got some other sneaky good spots popping up down there. So
they have many options. So.
All right. I love it. You played it safe a little bit, but
I did. Okay. I definitely played it safe.
It's okay. I did put you in a tough spot there. You don't want to turn any fans against you on your way out the door. But Jack, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for not only sharing, your family basketball history lineage, but also your own journey. Really appreciate it, and best of luck in the next step. And we'll be following you in your hoops career and maybe your amateur golf career as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Alex. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks once again to Jack for joining me. Really cool of him to share his stories about being up close to some of the, game's greats, Hall of Famers as a little kid and adolescent, teenager, and then kind of looking back and realizing how unique that was. Love hearing that type of stuff. And also some cool perspective, not only on his career at Michigan State and some neat moments and fun experiences as a walk-on there, but it also gave some valuable insight about what his dad, Fred, is doing at Nebraska as he is rebuilding that program over in Lincoln. So cool to touch a couple of Big Ten basketball programs in one episode. Hopefully the Spartans, Huskers fans enjoyed tuning in, and we'll toss it over now to another guy who should interest Spartans fans. It's Harold Shelton. If you're not a regular listener to the show, Harold joins us usually every week to talk about the ins and outs of Big Ten football and basketball. He is our manager of research. He is a great resource to talk to about all the happenings in the sports landscape, because it's his job to stay on top of it and make sure everyone on our talent, TV, and studio set is informed. So Harold's coming right up. We talk, since it is not in season, obviously, here in mid-May, we talk a little bit of NFL draft, since we haven't had an episode since then. I get a little giddy about Justin Fields going to the Chicago Bears. And beyond that, we talk about the new Big Ten basketball peek at the schedule, which gives us an idea of which teams will be matching up, how many times, who gets to play each other twice, which teams maybe avoid some of the tougher challenges in a Big Ten schedule, and we'll get into it right now. It's It's Harold Shelton coming right up.
All right, very pleased to be rejoined by Harold Shelton, Big Ten Network Manager of Research, back after a couple weeks, touch and go in the spring. You know, we missed a chunk of Big Ten news, including the NFL draft, but it's good to have you back, H.
Yeah, good to be back. I was able to kind of stretch my legs for a little bit over these last couple of weeks off. So I'm back and ready to go.
All right, we knew we had to talk to you this week because we got a Sparty guy on, Jack Hoiberg. Stat sheet stuffer he is not, but still fan favorite. Big name, obviously, with his family ties. And as we do now, every week when we have a guest on before you, I want you to get give some memories of what you remember about our guests in action and what kind of sticks out to you.
I remember, I think it was last year when Michigan State was playing at Nebraska, and I think it was Fred Hoiberg's first year. And, I remember Fred Hoiberg in the post game, and he's looking at the sheet and he's going through the starters, and he's like, that's 5 and 23, such, like 10. Who's 10? And he's like, oh, blank. That's Jack. Like, he didn't even realize that his son was starting the game against him. And so I thought that was a really, really fun moment. And I remember Jack hitting a couple shots in that game. And, I thought it was a class move by Izzo. I know Izzo and Fred Hoiberg are good friends. So I think it was a nice payoff for everybody involved there. And then this past year, with Michigan State's, tourney streak kind of in jeopardy there, he actually played some big minutes and some, spot duty, kind of held his own. You didn't really notice a drop off when he came in, and he certainly helped out when they were kind of low at point guard with Lawyer being out and Rocket struggling. And, they would plug him in for a couple minutes here and there and thought he ran the team well. So, I definitely remember those couple of things, and, best of luck to him down at UT-Arlington.
Yeah, for sure. And, he didn't indicate this at all, but I imagine it's got to be hard to be the son of a prominent coach / player, guy who's in the NBA, coach at a high level. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on Fred, obviously, especially with the Bulls job. Like, that's such a high profile job. But as a kid growing up, even though he didn't let on like it is, it's got to be, stressful. Just one, he did say that he had to kind of keep a low profile as far as like staying out of trouble, which that's definitely true as a teenager, when you might be running around wilding out or whatever. But I always admire kids that can keep it together throughout all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously just for different reasons, but like whenever you have a parent that's like an authority figure of something, like the last thing you want to do is to get in trouble and then have it go back to them, because then you're in double trouble. Like once the parents get back to you, like it's a big problem. And so like I know, speaking from experience, like my dad was my elementary school math teacher. My mom was the assistant principal at the middle school I went to. So like I couldn't really get into trouble, during those times, because obviously it would be embarrassing to them. And then I would catch, back at the house. So I definitely had to be on my P's and Q's. So from a much smaller perspective, I can understand what Jack might have been thinking at that point.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I come from somebody who was like embarrassed if their parents like chaperoned a field trip or anything like that. I can't imagine what that situation was like having them in the school. I'm glad that was not the case for me. And I don't want to act like Jack is some scrub. Like you said, he could hold his own against D1 guys when given the opportunity. Like we talked about a little bit with him, had to go up against Cassius Winston in practice. So I'm sure he'll make an impact down at UTA. Excited to see that. Like you said, best of luck to him. All right, H. We missed the opportunity a couple weeks ago without an episode dropping. I do have to continue my victory lap because of Justin Fields going to the Bears. It's been a thing with our digital department where we watch the NFL draft every year. We put out content related to our players that get drafted. And this is the first time that I really got personally excited, kind of got swept up in the evening when Justin Fields went to Chicago at number 11. And as the dominoes kind of started to fall and things started to line up, I could kind of see what was happening. That's when the excitement started to build. Some of us are Packers fans in our department. So for once, it was nice to have the tables turned. And I know as a Detroit guy, you guys are kind of the doormats alongside us in the NFC North. So I'm having my moment right now and still enjoying it 2 weeks later.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised that they did it. I mean, it makes complete sense as to why they did, but it just seemed like for so long, outside of getting Trubisky, it was kind of, we'll try to sign this guy, we'll try to sign this guy, we'll have a patchwork situation here. And I mean, look, the elephant in the room is you can't really think of many like black starting quarterbacks that they've had it. Maybe
Cordell Stewart is like the only
here
one.
and there, like Henry Burris filling in a little bit here and there, but not like, hey, this guy is absolutely the franchise going forward. So seeing Fields land there was surprising for multiple reasons, that I mentioned. But I think that's really all they needed. I mean, the defense is usually solid. The weapons are decent. Like, if they could protect them, I think he could do big things there.
Yeah, it was really the only thing that I think could have happened on draft night that would have got me back buying in as a Bears fan. Like, I was kind of checked out, to be honest, after they signed Andy Dalton, and it seemed like they weren't going to take competing seriously. They were going to, maybe be 8-9, 9-8 with a 17-game schedule, but they did it. And so, like, the Bears fan connection is obvious for me, but also, like, I'm trying to think. I don't think a Big Ten player that I've covered, not really covered because we're not Big J journalists, but been close to and followed really closely through their career. Big star. I can't think of any that have ended up in my favorite pro team. So that's a cool connection in that way, just because it's somebody that I've seen play and, I've kind of looked at and admired as an athlete. And now I get to root for him for hopefully, 10, 15 years. So selfishly just basking in the glow.
No, nothing wrong with that. And I mean, we've seen Justin Fields for 2 years. And I mean, he's maybe had 1.5 bad games in his career. I guess the one issue that people have with him is that he tends to hold on to the ball too long at times. But I think you can coach that. We can see the accuracy. We know how fast he is. We know how tough he is. We saw him bounce back from that Clemson game, and he played, on a bum knee his first year in Columbus and still got him to the playoffs. So I think it was a really good pick. I completely understand you basking in the glow, and if I was in that position, I'd be doing the same.
All right, not going to linger on the draft too long because it was quite a ways in the rearview mirror. So far, in fact, they already released a schedule 2 weeks later this past Wednesday. So we got some exciting dates on the calendar to look forward to. I'm such an NFL fan. I can't wait for the season to get here. Any other moves, though, players landing in spots that might be advantageous? Anything that stuck out to you as far as where we get to watch the Big Ten stars of years past play next season?
I'll name a couple and then kind of do a quick veer to something I wanted to touch on for a bit. But I mean, Pat Fryer move going to the Steelers seemed like a no-brainer fit there. I remember Jesse James, another Penn State tight end playing for them. And so now they can add another Penn State tight end to go there with them. I think Ambry Thomas landed in San Francisco in the 3rd round was a really nice pick for them. He gets to learn behind some veterans there. I think Kwity Paye going to the Colts at 21, already a young defense, adding a guy like that who can play some 3-4, 4-3, I think was a big fit there. I was a little shocked to see Davion Nixon go, was it 158 overall?
Yeah, he fell like the 5th round.
Yeah, I was very, very surprised to see that. I was surprised to see that there were 2 Iowa guys that went ahead of him. But I do think Amir Smith-Marsette's got a chance to make some noise in Minnesota as a returner and potentially, maybe a slot guy, give Kirk Cousins another weapon to throw the ball to. So I thought those were definitely some good fits. And I think for me, just overall, I was really struck by, not surprised that Ohio State had 10, but I was a little surprised that Michigan had 8. And you saw like their record this year, like the last couple of years, and you see like they continue to put out this NFL talent. Now, granted, I know some of those guys opted out this year. Like I know Nico Collins and Ambry Thomas opted out. So, I know that certainly had an effect. But you kind of see, they get, 15, 16, 17 guys drafted over a 2-year period, and the records don't really match up. And you kind of wonder what's going on there. Michigan State and Rutgers didn't have a player drafted at all. You kind of see why coaching changes happened because of that. There wasn't NFL talent on the rosters. Both Greg Schiano and Mel Tucker are living in the transfer portal and completely remaking those rosters. So that's going to make my job a lot harder once bus tour time comes, because I'm going to need name tags for a lot of these guys. I'm not going to know who they are. So, just the fact that, obviously there's some schools like Ohio State and Penn State, and they're churning out guys and they're winning a lot of games. And then you get some others who didn't get picked, and you see why. And Michigan State had a 80-year drought, 80-year streak snapped of a player getting drafted in the NFL. It just kind of goes to show that was kind of the end of the D'Antonio era, and that was kind of the fitting way to end it.
Yeah, glad you brought up Freiermuth, baby Gronk. I'd forgotten that he was like a huge Gronk fan. Took him in my fantasy rookie draft this past week, so hoping he pans out. Rondale Moore to the Cardinals is exciting. They got, a pretty high-powered offense now in the desert with Nuke Hopkins and Kyler Murray, and just kind of a long way that franchise has come in the last few years, kind of totally revitalizing it. I like Rashad Bateman on the Ravens. That passing game, or that, Lamar's great, but their receiving core was always kind of lacking depth. I mean, they brought in Des Bryant last year. That should tell you something. So having Bateman as a big target to kind of go alongside Hollywood Brown, I like that potential. You mentioned Kwity Paye to the Colts, and I don't really know how he fits on that team, but it was just cool to see him say to his mom that she didn't have to work anymore, especially with the story of that family being refugees and then coming over, and well told by now, as everyone discovered on draft night outside the Big Ten. And I wanted to get your thoughts real quick on Trey Sermon going to the third round to the Niners, because it just seemed like Trey Sermon was great, but he didn't really break out until late in the season. And it seems like with how running backs are valued, I just was surprised to see him go that early. Don't think it's a bad thing, but want to get your thoughts on big bruising running backs, where Sermon might fit in the NFL, this modern NFL.
I guess I'm not too surprised he got drafted where he did, just because, the Northwestern game, he was great. The Clemson game, he was great. And he, even though he's a bigger guy, he still showed some breakaway speed there. And I think the tape from Oklahoma also showed he can be a complete back. I know earlier in the year, they didn't really throw to him as much, but then we started to see that part of his game as well. So, we know he can run it, he can catch it. I think going to an offense like Kyle Shanahan's out there in San Francisco will be very, very beneficial. And we've seen Ohio State running backs, do well in the league. I mean, Carlos Hyde's still doing his thing, and obviously Zeke's doing his thing. So, I think Ohio State running back will just add Sermon to that list, and I'd be surprised if he's not successful.
And I like the fit, because San Francisco, they push people around. They got big boys, Juszczyk at fullback. They, on their defense, they're tough. Kyle Shanahan's knows what he wants out there. So be excited to see Trey Sermon add to that mix. Mostert as well, with the speed aspect as well. So a lot of Big Ten guys on that roster, George Kittle included. All right, that's enough NFL. Let's talk some hoops in May. As a huge basketball fan, like we both are, I know I'm never tired of college basketball, tired of talking about it. And I think the sting has wore off a little bit from Big Ten's disappointing show in late March, early April. So what do you say? I know there was a schedule release today, sort of. It always sneaks up on me every year that the Big Ten does this kind of semi-schedule release, and they announce what they call the conference opponent matchups or breakdowns. There's not even really a neat term for it, but basically we have to find out how many times the Big Ten basketball teams play each other in the upcoming season. So before we even get into the matchups and who maybe got off easy and who had tough draws, do we have any background as why it's always in May when they do this, and how they do this, and what the protocol is here?
I'm not sure why it comes out in May. I know once they went to the 20-game schedule, obviously they've done it with, 7. Every school gets 7 teams, both home and away, and then 6 teams once, and that's split, home and away. I'm assuming Kevin Pogger is part of the scheduling process. For those who don't know him, he is a schedule guru. He's a Michigan State basketball ops guy now. And he's always been a big factor in scheduling. I know he was a big part of the football second release last year. So I'm sure he could have a better insight on that, I had to hit him up about it and just kind of ask, like, why May, why now, kind of thing. But his brain power definitely gets used on that. And I'm always curious to see, because there's always the conspiracy theories I hear of, well, such and such always gets an easier schedule. Why does this team always play, Michigan State twice? Or why do they always play Wisconsin twice? So I'm always curious to see like what kind of goes into that.
Yeah, the very Spartan-centric episode with Kevin Palgan mentioned. I've never met him, but I got an indirect compliment from him once. Apparently he liked one of the things we did at the Big Ten basketball tournament, and knowing kind of what he did and like you said, the brain power behind it, I was very flattered, because even looking at the layout of the schedule release for basketball, my mind has a hard time wrapping itself around who's playing who twice, if this is good, if this is bad. My brain just never worked that way quickly to decipher, what is a favorable matchup, and reading it off a spreadsheet or a page like that. So let's get into it a little bit. H, any like off the top observations of teams that have it set up kind of nice, just based off where projections are? And look, like, we all know this is May, and the NBA draft is still 2 months away. Players should come back, players could leave, transfers could come in and out. There's a long way to go, but just with an idea of where things stand, what jumped out at you with the soft schedule release here?
I think Purdue was a big winner. Just kind of looking at it on the surface, they return, so much of that team. And then you look, Maryland's supposed to be really good. They only get them once. It's at home. Ohio State's supposed to be really good. They only get them once at home. Michigan State will probably be pretty good. I don't know if they're top 3 or top 4 in the Big Ten good, but, should still be a tourney team. They only get them once, and it's on the road. Always good to see the rivalry be played twice, so they get 2 with Indiana. Obviously, 2 with Michigan will be tough, 2 with Wisconsin, 2 with Illinois. But anytime you can play, 3 of your main contenders just once, and 2 of those being at home, I think that gives you a big advantage.
Yeah, I had Michigan and Illinois as 2 that had tough draws, just because it did seem like they have teams in the top, projected to be in the top of the Big Ten. Your Ohio State's and Purdue for Michigan, also Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State on there. Teams that might not be great, or at least not projected to be right now, but middle of the pack and could have some potential. And then Illinois projected to play Maryland, Michigan, and Purdue all twice. I thought that was a little difficult, although they did dodge a bullet with Ohio State, who should be very solid. So I don't know if those teams fell into your tough draws at all, but those were a couple that off the paper jumped off to me.
Yeah, I definitely had Michigan in the tough draw category. I think Illinois, I get your point, but I think having Ohio State and Wisconsin being your one plays and both of them being at home, I think is very beneficial. And your one plays on the road being Minnesota, Nebraska, and who knows what Indiana is going to be at this point, but that's a winnable game, I would think. So having those be your 3 one-offs on the road, I think works well there. And you just kind of see what happens with Maryland and Michigan State and Purdue and Rutgers. You hope to hold your own at home and maybe split some of those on the road. Again, anytime you could take your contenders and only have to play them one time, and you get, more than those split at home, like, you'll take it every time.
Yeah, and good point about Indiana. Like, it's very strange, because I think I've been talking to them being a pretty good team next year. Rarely do you see it in year one of a new head coach, but I could see it kind of working out, maybe like Illinois had in 2012-13, where they had a good roster coming back. They just needed a change at the head coaching position, and they won some big games, beat some really top tier teams that year, and then made the NCAA tournament with a pretty good record. I think they were 7th seed. So I can see Indiana doing that. I don't know how you feel about them, because it is strange just having them under year one of a coach that wasn't the first option, to be honest. Getting relatively favorable, I think, projections just as it stands now. And Trace Jackson Davis obviously has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, the fact that he was able to keep him was huge. I mean, it looked like he was out the door. Race Thompson was another one he was able to get to stay. I know they lost Armand Franklin, but keeping those 2 guys, I think, speaks to the recruiting job that Woodson did to keep those guys there. And I'll just be curious to see how they play. I mean, Indiana, for the Archie Miller era just wasn't a good shooting team. They were not efficient offensively at all. And I'll be curious to see, with Woodson's NBA background, they brought Dane Fife in, as an assistant to kind of help with the guards. So I'll be curious to see how that team looks. I think they're a complete wild card at this point.
Any other teams that you look at and think that maybe they got a short end of the stick as far as scheduling goes? It was tough. I was kind of scrolling through, and it's hard to find some that I think a lot of that comes with also not knowing who the elite teams could possibly be.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so hard is we don't really know. Like this team could be really good, and I think a lot of it is because of the portal. Like I don't think we thought Maryland would be that great. Coming back, but then, they added a couple of guys and, I know Andy Katz has them, I think, as his favorite.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. I had that listed for later as our last topic because I want to get your thoughts. But yeah, it's a good point. The portal's good to them. They got Fats Russell and Wahab, two great, first of all, just straight up names coming into the Big Ten. Fats Russell's elite. And then, what is it, Judas Wahab or Kudus Wahab? Kudus Wahab, I think. That's another cool name. Yeah. So good point about them. How about maybe some favorable schedules? I had a few teams written down. It was easier, I think, to single those out. But again, we never really know.
I had Michigan State as somewhat favorable. Obviously, you're going to have a rivalry game with Michigan twice. And I think what I always look for the schedules are your natural rivals and do you play them once or twice?
Yep.
I know the conferences try to fix that going forward to make sure that, Indiana, Purdue play twice and Michigan State play twice and things like that. I noticed Wisconsin, Iowa only play once, but they do get Minnesota twice. So I always look for those. And Michigan State, they get Purdue once, but it's at home. They get Ohio State just once, it's on the road. But, the fact that, Mackey has been a house of horrors for them and they can avoid that completely, I think is a huge win.
I have Michigan State as well as a lighter side of the schedule. I had Indiana. Their single plays. Michigan, I think was fortunate for them. Michigan State, and we don't know if Illinois is going to be another top 4 team this year. Kind of waiting on Kofi to decide on that front. But that's another single play team that beat them twice last year. So I thought Indiana's was relatively favorable. Wisconsin as well. They get Michigan and Maryland once, as well as Illinois and Iowa. So Iowa's another team. It's just, they'll probably take a decent step back, but you just never know. They still do have some veterans and some young talent. We know Bohannon's coming back. Keegan Murray looked really good at times last year. McCaffrey's are still there as Patrick looked to be a pretty good contributor off the bench. So I don't know, a lot of speculation, but I had Wisconsin and then Northwestern, all their single plays, I'm pretty sure, don't have it right in front of me, but it seemed like all their single plays were top tier Big Ten teams. So maybe the Cats can maybe maintain the hot start they got off to last year, or at least, take a step forward and what'll be an interesting year for Chris Collins.
Yeah, it looks like they get Michigan, Ohio State once on the road, Rutgers, Wisconsin once at home. So yeah, you'll definitely take that.
Yep.
Maryland, they get twice. Purdue, they get twice. But we'll see. They actually played pretty well against Maryland last year. And they beat Michigan State last year. They get them twice. So, yeah, I think that's a good call on the Wildcats.
Yeah, teams, you got to look for teams of first-year head coaches too, like Minnesota, Penn State, twice on team schedules. And those are places where it's way more of a build and a lift than it is in Indiana. So when I see those teams popping up twice on team schedules, then, it tends to lean more favorably. I think it's going to be tough for both those schools this year. But
no, I agree with that.
We'll see. Anyone else on the light side of the draw that you saw?
I think we could say Ohio State. The fact that they get Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers all once, I think is certainly helpful. The only thing that prevented me from saying completely on the lighter side was that the Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers games are all on the road.
Right.
So obviously that's tough. But, getting Michigan State, not having to go to Breslin where they lost a year ago and they've struggled to win up there recently, I think it is big. But still got Maryland twice, still got Michigan twice. So this league, the way it is, you're just kind of looking for any little edge possible. And, obviously we're just kind of spitballing here, but it's a fun exercise to look at, so far out.
Yeah. And one thing to remember that it's kind of hard to recalibrate your brain for, at least for me, is these arenas are probably going to be full again next year. I don't see why not at this point. Obviously no announcement's been made, but it seems like that's where things are trending just in major sports. And those special environments should be back, right? Like Mackey Arena is one, Breslin's another one, and Rutgers was really intimidating in the final year with fans. So like last year just was a complete outlier, I think, with things really balancing, evening out. And it matters if your single play draw is away at Mackey, like that's tougher than some other schools for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I had the fans coming back as part of the reason why I picked the schedules as such. Like you said, I think Mackey's probably the toughest arena in the Big Ten. Those fans are right on top of you. That metal ceiling kind of keeps all of the sound in there. And just speaking from, fan experience, seeing good Michigan State teams go in there and just get absolutely worked year after year after year. And I remember the Virginia game, I think the year after Virginia won the title, and they go in there and lose by 30. It could get really ugly really fast if you're an opponent that's not playing well there. So having the fans back at Mackey, I think will be a huge boost for a team that's already going to be probably top 3 in the Big Ten.
Yep, for sure. All right. So you touched on it briefly. I want to bring it up as our last topic here. Andy Katz came out with his spring power rankings. He did some right after the Final Four or after the season ended. He sent me some by surprise last week, late last week, and they came out Wednesday of this week. And I was thinking, do we really need these? It's May. We don't know who's coming back, who's still around for sure yet. And I broke down because Andy's going to get what he wants in this type of scenario. He's a content factory, and we put it out and it did numbers. Like, people want, I guess, power rankings in May, and obviously they care about what Andy thinks. And I saw media from across the Big Ten kind of retweeting it during a slow time of year and commenting on it. So you mentioned he had Maryland 1. I'll run through his top 5. Michigan at 2, Purdue 3, Ohio State 4, Indiana at 5. What are your thoughts on this very early power rankings about 6 months from the first tip?
I think the fact that we have the list just kind of goes to show that people are craving college basketball still. Like the college basketball diehards will just find anything to give them a reason to talk about it. And so the fact that we're talking about this in May, when you still got guys in the portal, we don't know if they're bringing anybody in, if players are going to come back from the portal, rosters aren't finalized, guys are still testing the NBA draft process. So obviously there's a, very, very fluid situations at a lot of these schools. But, that doesn't stop, for instance, ESPN putting out the way too early top 25 immediately after the national championship game ends in football and basketball. So, I don't see why we can't have a little fun with it. I was surprised to see Maryland 1. I thought it would be Purdue or Michigan. I think Purdue is going to be absolutely a load to deal with this coming year. I'm not surprised that Michigan is as high. I think Eli Brooks coming back with a huge boost for them. I think with Maryland, we'll just have to see. I remember, a couple years ago, they were top 5, top 10-ish team. And, they've had, really good teams in the past that haven't necessarily, finished as the top dog, even though they had the 3-way split a couple years ago. I kind of want to see if they live up to that hype.
Yeah, the only, I guess, issue I would have, and I guess I could just tell them this, but we'll discuss it here. It's good content, good fodder. If you're gonna speculate on some teams, like he put Maryland at number 1 under condition that they get some version of Ayala and Wiggins and those guys and Morcell back, right? But he put other teams lower, Ohio State at 4 and Illinois at 6 or 7, because maybe in those versions Liddell and Kofi and some of these guys on the fence don't return. So it seems like you give some teams the benefit of the doubt, some you don't, but that's how it's going to be in these types of rankings where so much uncertain. I would probably have put Michigan and Purdue, 1-2 or maybe interchangeably 1A, 1B, just because we know, I think, have a better idea of who's coming back there, even though there's still some question marks throughout the league. But yeah, like you said, it's people like us who love college basketball that will talk about it, and that's the reason that type of video gets 40,000 views on Twitter or whatever we're sitting at the time of this taping.
Yeah, exactly. And I gotta say, I'm a little surprised at Indiana at 5. We just kind of talked about how much of a wild card they are, and I think seeing them ahead of your Michigan State, Illinois, Wisconsin, even Rutgers was a little surprising to me. But again, Trace Jackson Davis is a monster. The fact that they were able to keep Grace Thompson. They should be good. I think they could be a tourney team. I just was surprised to see him as high this early.
All right. Well, we're glad that Andy has that motor, and content never sleeps with him and gives us something to talk about. Glad that, you got the same motor, H, and we're still talking in mid-May, and we will keep it rolling. That's all I got for you today, but appreciate you jumping on and, having fun with it as always. And we will talk soon if you don't have anything else.
Yeah, sounds good. Things are starting to slow down, so I'll definitely be available. And, whatever the next topic is, I'm sure we can find something to talk about for a while.
All right, sounds good. Talk soon.
All right, man. Be good.
All right, thanks once again to Harold and Jack for joining the show. Really good stuff from a couple of Spartans. Spartan dogs is what I believe they call them. And, really fun as always to talk to people in the Michigan State community. As we talked about with Jack, it's a tight-knit program they run up there in East Lansing. And everyone always speaks very highly of the entire operation. So good to chat with Harold, as we always do. And, fill in time, obviously, in the off season. We're all kind of getting ready for summer, but it's always nice to check back in with what's going on in the Big Ten football and basketball landscape. So hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did chatting with those two. Continue to crank out some episodes here as we move along. Maybe a little slower cadence when the summer picks up, but we'll have at least a couple more coming by the end of May. All right, thanks as always, everyone, for listening. Thank you to Julie Bronder for stitching the show together. Quick reminder that you can find the Take 10 podcast on the main podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean, and we are on YouTube as well. Search for Big Ten Network's YouTube channel. Subscribe to it, and there's a playlist for the Take 10 podcast where you can see these interviews, watch them, watch the guests react to my brilliant questions in real time. All right. Thanks, everyone, and we will talk to you soon here on the Take 10 podcast.